let's bring into the conversation here our friend, national security expert and retired Marine intelligence officer, Hal Kempfer. Hal joins me now. Hal, good to see you, and I hope you had a good weekend. There's still so many of these developments, these news items to get to. Let's get to them right now. And in the meantime, I want to get your thoughts. We do have some new video as well, just of the fighting. And I want to make this clear. The IDF released some of these videos we're about to show here of the intense fighting there in Gaza. And so this is what we know now, Hal, according to Trey's reporting. The Israeli military releasing this more footage there from the combat activity inside the Gaza Strip. So, Hal, officials with the Israeli Defense Forces say northern Gaza is now cut off from the rest of the territory. What are we to make of that? I guess that tracks from what we've been talking about for the last, 30 days, since Israel gave these evacuation orders for Gazans living in the enclave to move north to south, right, Hal? That's just how this is unfolded, right?
Andrew, I would say it tracks completely. We've talked about them basically setting up a northern zone of action, if you will, where they told everybody to go south. There's a wetland area, basically a riverbed wetland area that's of clear delineation on the ground. They made it very easy for everybody up there to say, hey, get south of that. That's where you'll be safe. And that's where they moved down. Most of them did move down. Matter of fact, went to the south. And now they're actually going in. So what they've done is they gave them time, actually quite a bit of time, to move out of Gaza, and now they've encircled it, which you have to do for urban warfare. You got to cut off all the avenues of approach, all the avenues where they might bring in supplies, support, whatever. You got to cut that off, and now they're going in and they're going to reduce that urban area, if you will. This will be, street by street, block by block, building by building, clearing these areas, but they're being very careful, from what I can see, to move very cautiously. They're doing a lot of intelligence gathering. Matter of fact, I would imagine this evening, there's a lot of stuff probably happening on the ground. If you're not seeing a lot of explosions, which I didn't see a lot of explosions with that brief shot, that means you have troops probably operating on the ground, probably some troops operating beneath the ground and through the Gaza tunnel system as well. Okay. And trying to get as far forward as they can under the cover of darkness. And they know that when the light comes up, they're going to see Hamas fighters popping out of holes, but they're ready for that.
Okay.
They're going to take hits, but they're ready for it.
All right, Hal, and you alerted me to this. This was posted on the IDF's Twitter page today. It's a very, very short video of them kind of outlining for us, showing the world where Hamas sets up some of these strongholds, some of these command and control centers within the Gaza Strip. I just want our viewers to watch this, and then you can respond on the back end to make it seem, like we understand what we are watching. This was put out by the IDF today.
נמצאים בשבט צופים של צפון הרצועה. אפשר לראות פה את השמות, אפשר לראות פה את כל התמונות סייבר של הצופים הנחמדים, ובתוך השבט עצמו אפשר לראות פה אפשר לראות מודולים רקטות מנות ככל הנראה או לאשקלון או למרחב הצפון, ממש בתוך השבט צופים.
Okay, Hal, we have this freeze frame right here. What are we looking at right there specifically? They were walking in kind of this hollowed out, I believe, preschool, some type of young child's education center there. And then they pointed this out. What is that?
Rocket launchers. Basically rockets and rocket launchers. Basically what they're showing was the school itself. And keep in mind, this is what Hamas does. They don't feel obligated to obey the Geneva Convention or any of the other international laws with armed conflict. What they do is they specifically set up their military and paramilitary operations in what are under international law normally protected sites. Mosques, houses of worship, if you will, schools, hospitals. And that's what the Israelis have been saying all along is, they're trying to go through and attack. They're trying to go through and deal with these things. But the problem is Hamas has put them in some areas. So what you'll hear on the propaganda or information front is that Israel attacked a school. And the inference in everyone's mind would be oh my gosh, they attacked a school and it's full of children. And of course, they will put out that mostly it was children that were killed. The reality is the school was being used as a rocket storage place or as a rocket launching place. It's basically being used as a military facility to launch rockets into Israel.
Okay.
And that's why it's a target. Now, when the enemy, if you will, and Hamas is the enemy of the IDF in this, when the enemy uses a protected site for military purposes under international law, under the international law of war, it loses its protected status.
Okay.
And but I will say this. You and I can understand that, but I got to take to the protesters on the capital cities, on college campuses, this doesn't really resonate. All they hear is at a school or a hospital or something, particularly schools or mosques that they've got hit.
Right.
That's all they hear. They don't hear the rest of it.
All right. Yeah. And Hal, we also know, according to the health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza, they say the Palestinian death toll has already surpassed 10,000. Now, the ministry does not distinguish those casualty figures between those who are fighters and those who are civilians. And of course, we know about 1,400 Israelis died, most of them civilians, in that surprise attack by Hamas on October the 7th. Hal, if we can, let's just move to what the United States is doing right now. This got a lot of attention over the weekend. I'm going to put this tweet up. This is from U.S. Central Command, Hal, posting a photo of that. And you're going to describe to us what that is, why that is significant. This is what they say on November 5th, 2023, yesterday. An Ohio-class submarine arrived in the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. Now, that is very vague, Hal. We don't know where this is. Presumably, it's somewhere in the Middle East, but CENTCOM felt the need to post a photo of it. An Ohio-class submarine, a very new class of submarine, has a lot of capabilities. Hal, what did you make of this? This was quite striking.
A little bit bold, a little unusual to print anything about submarines. That we tend not to say much. The reason they call it the silent service is because, well, they run quietly, but also we don't talk much about them because of what they do. This is the thing, and this is why this is posted. It carry up to 154 cruise missiles, at each missile having basically 1,000-pound warhead. That creates a tremendous amount of devastation. The reason that's being posted is it's aimed at one group in particular, which is pretty much Hezbollah up to the north. It's a way of saying, if you decide that you're going to weigh in more heavily, not only the aircraft carriers doing airstrikes, but we can rain a lot of cruise missiles down on you, and you need to go back and basically just count the number of places you think that we know about that we're going to hit. And the reality is it's a tremendous strike capability, and that's why they posted out there. This is right now kind of an information war for the U.S. We're not really engaged in major, certainly except for defensive operations in Syria and Iraq and some other places, not really engaged in combat operations to any great extent other than defending, force protection. This is basically making it very clear to Hezbollah and, of course, their main backer, which is Iran, that we have the capability of launching a lot of pretty devastating firepower onto their positions should they decide to do more. I think this is just kind of hedging our bet a little bit that the message has been received by Nasrallah. Of course, I would also mention that Hezbollah launched about 30 rockets today, kind of upping the ante a little bit on the border,
right?
But not crossing a line that everybody's watching.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of pair that as well with what Liz Frieden there at the Pentagon for us tweeted as well from Pat Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary, saying this: attacks on U.S. forces increased significantly over the weekend, rising to 38 total since October 17th. No injuries or damage to U.S. military personnel or bases has been reported. Okay, so no damage to any U.S. military personnel or bases. But Hal, take a look at some of this video from over the weekend. This was in Turkey. We have U.S. troops stationed there. So it says Turkish security forces disperse pro-Palestine protesters outside of this Turkish airbase, which is jointly used by the U.S. Air Force. So a lot of this is happening concurrently. I'm pairing this all together because it's of a piece, Hal, right? Because the United States is keenly and fully aware of the threats to our troops in the region since this has all started October 7th, right?
Incirlik is a major base. That's our biggest base that we have in Turkey, which is a member of NATO. Obviously, protests like that are a great concern. The fact that the Turkish security forces stepped in and actually took care of this for the most part is somewhat comforting. U.S. personnel mixing it up with Turkish protesters would be a very different story, as you can well imagine.
Right.
Now, I would like to say one thing about General Ryder's comment. To date, about 40, according to the Pentagon, about 45 personnel have been injured with blast effects.
Right.
Basically, things tied to concussion or some sort of traumatic brain injury. Those take a long time to diagnose, particularly when you're in a more expeditionary type environment in the field. It's not like you have all the diagnostic tools available to you. So really what you notice is behavioral changes or things like that. So it's taking a while, but there were effects that were taking place. And then also I might mention that in Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, where I was stationed at one time, they did find a drone embedded in one of the buildings. Apparently it made it all the way through the air defenses, and fortunately the explosive warhead did not go off, but they were saying that if it had gone off, there's a chance that it could have killed military personnel. So let's just say U.S. forces are on extremely heightened alert.
Sure.
And I expect to see more kinetic response to some of these attacks from Iranian proxies.
All right, and Hal, I do want to put this shot back up. This is southern Israel looking into Gaza. President Biden had yet another phone call today with Bibi Netanyahu. The White House put out a readout of the phone call. They said this: the president and prime minister discussed ongoing efforts to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas, including many children and a number of American citizens. The two leaders welcomed the increase in humanitarian assistance over the past week and discussed the necessity to significantly ramp up deliveries over the coming week, including by increasing the capacity to screen and stage trucks going into Gaza. The president reiterated his steadfast support for Israel and the protection of Israeli citizens from Hamas and all other threats, while also emphasizing the imperative to protect Palestinian civilians and reduce civilian harm in the course of military operations. And so this went on and on as well. It says the two leaders discussed the possibility of tactical pauses to provide civilians with opportunities to safely depart from areas of ongoing fighting. Now, Hal, that's the sentence in this readout, I think, that everyone is kind of globbing onto today. Biden explicitly brought up in this latest phone call with Netanyahu humanitarian pauses. You're hearing that more and more again. They're gaining steam, so much so that they could be gaining steam as well with the Israeli government, with Netanyahu's coalition. Have you seen that kind of coalesce almost over the weekend, that maybe some Israeli officials are coming around to this idea that has been pushed throughout the last, 2 weeks by U.S. officials?
Andrew, I'll admit, I globbed onto that as well. Okay. It jumped out at me. And it was interesting. Benjamin Netanyahu came out and afterwards said sort of words like tactical little pauses, which sounds very close to what we've been talking about when we talk about the distinction between a ceasefire and a tactical pause. Couple of things. They have said, look, we're linking a ceasefire, or we being Israel, linking ceasefires to release of hostages. All right. And that seems to be putting a lot of impetus on the hostage negotiations, if you will, that are taking place through third parties. The other thing, though, that was fascinating is tactical little pauses. I don't know why Netanyahu put the word little in there, but that does sound like what we had discussed. I believe Friday we had discussed the idea of that there would be limited time and space pauses. I believe he was talking about pauses for an hour or a few hours. There's your time frame.
Okay.
And the space might be in certain areas. And I think you're looking at that southern region. One thing I would like to mention on logistics, for a few days, 2 or 3 days this week, there were at least around 100 truckloads of aid that had gone through the Rafah gate in there. That's a significant increase. Now today it was quite less, and I don't know what the reason was that they had less going in there, but there was this really big jump, like a tripling or quadrupling of trucks going in. So there was some level of aid that was going in well above what we had seen before.
Yeah, and Hal, speaking of aid, I want to put this up too. This is what you were kind of alluding to last week. This is from King Abdullah II of Jordan. He says this: our fearless Air Force personnel airdropped at midnight urgent medical aid to the Jordanian field hospital in Gaza. This is our duty to aid our brothers and sisters injured in the war on Gaza. We will always be there for our Palestinian brethren. So, Hal, they dropped a field hospital in Gaza, yes, with the help of the IDF. And so you're seeing aid in this form kind of take shape there in the Gaza Strip. And so I think you're going to be hearing about getting more aid in throughout the course of this week. And this also kind of dovetails as well, Hal, with yet another report I want to bring up and I want to get you to respond to. I know I'm kind of shooting off on all cylinders here, but there's so much to talk about. This was a pretty bombshell report there in Politico yesterday. State Department staffers offered a blistering critique of the Biden administration's handling of the war in a dissent memo obtained by Politico, arguing that, among other things, the United States should be willing to publicly criticize the Israelis. The memo has two key requests. Hal, it says that the U.S. support a ceasefire and that it balance its private and public messaging toward Israel, including airing criticisms of Israeli military tactics and treatment of Palestinians that the United States generally prefers to keep private. So, Hal, you had Secretary of State Antony Blinken on this whirlwind trip to the Middle East over the weekend, going to Israel, meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, then going to Iraq, to Baghdad. That was a surprise trip. And then I believe earlier today he was in Turkey meeting with officials there. And he got a lot of pushback from some of these Middle Eastern leaders, from some of his foreign counterparts, calling for the same thing, apparently, that many State Department staffers are also calling for. What do you make of this? Yes, that is a tool available inside the State Department, known as the dissent channel. Is it being used appropriately here, do you think?
I got to tell you, as far as I can tell, there's nothing inappropriate about what it is. Obviously embarrassing for the administration. That was set up some time ago, and that was one of those things that there was a lot of frustration within State Department and elsewhere in the government in the lead up to the going into Iraq in 2003. A lot of senior officials felt that their career government officials, diplomats, and others felt that their voices were not being heard, that they were being overridden by political considerations. So this is a tool that's a way to bring up dissent, so that basically at the end of the day, the White House can't turn around and say, we didn't hear anything contrary to our position. This puts that out there formally. I can't tell you if it's being used specifically in an appropriate manner, because I'm not really schooled on the protocols on how that is delivered. I would hope it is. But with that said, it was interesting to hear that, the split within the State Department. But I want to point out that Secretary Blinken, went to the West Bank, went to Baghdad, which kind of caught me by surprise. He went to Baghdad, and then he, wearing a flak jacket, actually flew in a Black Hawk into the green zone, and then and then went to Incirlik, the same place you showed on the video where there was a protest out front. Rather interesting, kind of bold for a Secretary of State to do that, and considering all the other things going on. But here's the thing: the window I think that comes out of this is they've got, to quote Benjamin Netanyahu, tactical little pauses being discussed by the IDF.
Right.
It's not a full-blown ceasefire, but in any negotiation, you gotta kind of have to sort of meet in the middle.
Okay. And
I think that's where they're going on this, is they're trying to find a pathway to meet in the middle. By the way, I want to say one thing. Jordan is an interesting country. They're a great ally of the United States. throughout the war on terror and before. And you can't air deliver a field hospital without a tremendous amount of coordination in the air and on the ground. And that tells you, despite what may be seen as this diplomatic, higher overarching, we'd like to see a ceasefire, you're seeing at a functional level some things happening operationally, which tell you there's a lot of communication back and forth.
Okay. Do you mean communication between members of Hamas? Is that what you're alluding to, or just
no? I don't think there's no communication with
okay.
Hamas.
Okay.
Unless there's a plan to drop the field hospital directly on their heads. Okay, I'm being facetious, but you get the idea. All right. Yeah.
Hal, we just want to take a quick commercial break. We have one more topic we want to get to with you when we come back, and that is the rise in anti-Semitism we've been seeing on college campuses, and of course this massive protest, pro-Palestinian protest that took place outside the White House gates over the weekend. More on that in 2 minutes.